Chapter 1. The first hour that was not measured. No one remembered when the clock tower was built. It stood at the center of the old city, taller than the surrounding rooftops, its stone darkened by age and weather, its narrow windows always faintly lit. Travelers sometimes asked about it, but the answers were never precise. It has always been there, the townsfolk would say. And in a way, that was true. The tower did not announce the time. Its bells did not ring each hour, nor did its hands move in the ordinary fashion. Instead, its great clock face shifted only when something meaningful occurred within the city, when a promise was kept, when grief softened, when a long-awaited understanding finally arrived. Most people did not notice. They lived their lives guided by smaller clocks in kitchens and shops, by routines and daylight and habit. The tower was simply part of the skyline, familiar enough to be ignored. Except by one person, the keeper. His name was Alaric, though few spoke it aloud anymore. He lived within the tower itself, in a narrow set of rooms wrapped around the central gears. He rose without an alarm, ate without hurry, and worked without schedule. Each day, or what others would call a day, he climbed the winding stairs to the heart of the mechanism, where brass wheels rested in patient stillness. There he listened. Not for sound exactly, but for readiness. The clock tower did not move unless invited. Alaric had learned this long ago, during his first season as keeper. Back then, he had tried to clean and polish and adjust the mechanism as one might any other clock. The result had been silence, heavy and unyielding. Only when he stopped trying to control it did the tower begin to respond. This morning, or perhaps it was simply a beginning, the tower felt alert. Alaric paused midway up the stairs, one hand resting on the cool stone wall. He closed his eyes and breathed slowly, letting his awareness settle outward rather than in. Something had shifted. Not sharply, not urgently, but enough. When he reached the chamber, the great clock face glimmered faintly from within, its markings indistinct, as though waiting to decide what shape they should take. "Good," Alaric murmured softly. "You're awake." He set about his quiet tasks, checking the lanterns that warmed the gears, adjusting nothing, forcing nothing. The clock tower did not respond to effort, it responded to attention. As he worked, memories drifted through his thoughts, as they often did in the presence of the tower. He remembered the first hour it had ever marked during his keeping. It had not been joy. It had been forgiveness. A woman in the city had forgiven a brother who had not returned when promised. Not aloud. Not ceremoniously. Just quietly, one evening, when she set an extra place at the table and then removed it again without anger. The clock had moved then. Just a fraction. Enough to be noticed by someone who was watching. Alaric smiled faintly at the memory. The tower did not care for grand events. It marked moments that reshaped the inside of a person, not the outside of the world. As he descended the stairs later, the city stirred gently around the base of the tower. Shops opened. Doors creaked. Footsteps passed. No one looked up. That was as it should be. Until one person did. She stood at the edge of the square, her travel cloak wrapped loosely around her shoulders, her gaze fixed not on the tower's height, but on its face. She was young, though not in a way that felt fragile, and she carried herself with the careful awareness of someone who had spent time listening rather than speaking. Alaric noticed her immediately. The tower noticed her too. The clock face shimmered, not moving, not yet, but acknowledging. The woman took a step forward, then stopped, as if uncertain whether she was allowed closer. Alaric descended the final steps and stepped into the square. "You're watching the wrong clock," he said gently. The woman startled slightly, then smiled in apology. "I was hoping it might be the right one." Alaric studied her for a moment longer than politeness required. "Most people don't come here for answers," he said. She met his gaze. "I'm not sure what I'm looking for. Only that I haven't found it yet." The tower hummed, low and almost imperceptible. Alaric felt it in his chest. The first hour was approaching. And once marked, it could never be undone. "Then," he said at last, stepping aside and opening the tower door, "you'd better come inside." The woman hesitated only a moment before entering. Behind them, the city continued on, unaware. Above them, the clock tower waited, patient, attentive, ready to mark something that could not be measured. And the first meaningful hour of a new story began, quietly, without anyone needing to name it. Chapter 2. The Hour That Listened. The inside of the clock tower was warmer than the square below. Not warm in the way of fire or sun, but in the way old rooms gather heat slowly and keep it, as though remembering every hand that had ever rested against their walls. The door closed behind them with a soft, final sound, and the city's distant movement faded into something muted and far away. The woman paused just inside, her eyes adjusting to the amber glow of lanterns set deep into the stone. The light revealed a narrow spiral staircase winding upward, its steps worn smooth at the center by generations of careful feet. "I didn't expect it to feel like this," she said quietly. Alaric nodded. Most people expect clocks to feel hurried. She smiled faintly at that, then touched the wall as if to reassure herself it was solid. "What does it feel like to you?" Alaric considered the question as he began to climb. "Like a place that waits its turn." She followed, her steps light, unhurried. The staircase seemed to encourage slowness. Each step rose just a little higher than expected, making rushing uncomfortable and unnecessary. "My name is Morel," she said after a few moments. Alaric inclined his head. "Alaric." They climbed in silence for a while. The only sounds were the soft rhythm of their footsteps and the distant, almost imagined hum of the tower's inner workings. "Does it ever tell you what it's going to do?" Morel asked. "No," Alaric replied. "Only when it's ready." They reached a landing where the stairs widened into a small chamber. Brass gears rested there, immense and motionless, their surfaces dulled by age but carefully kept free of dust. Lantern light reflected softly along their edges, giving the impression of movement even in stillness. Morel stopped short. "It's beautiful," she said, her voice lowered instinctively. "But it's not working." "It's listening," Alaric corrected gently. She glanced at him. "To what?" "To people," he said. "To moments. To what settles instead of passes." Morel stepped closer to one of the gears. She did not touch it, but held her hand near, as though sensing warmth. "And you?" she asked. "What do you listen for?" Alaric took his time answering. "For the moment when something stops resisting itself." Morel exhaled slowly. "That sounds rare." "It is," Alaric agreed. "Which is why the clock rarely moves." They continued upward, passing narrow windows that offered slivers of the city beyond. From this height, the streets looked gentler, smaller, less demanding. Life moved there, but without urgency. Morel stopped at one window and lingered. "I've been traveling a long time," she said. "Not far. Just long." Alaric waited. "I kept thinking that if I stayed in motion," she continued, "whatever I was avoiding wouldn't be able to catch up." "And did it?" he asked quietly. She smiled, not unkindly. "It waited." The stairs led them higher, to a chamber unlike the others. Here, the walls were lined with narrow shelves, each holding a small brass plate etched with symbols Alaric recognized instantly. "These are ours," he said, noticing her curiosity. "Already measured ones?" she asked. "Held ones," he corrected. "The tower remembers them so the city doesn't have to." Morel leaned closer to read the markings. "There are so many." "Yes," Alaric said. "Most people think meaningful moments are rare. They aren't. They're just quiet." Morel turned to him. "Why does the tower need a keeper?" Alaric rested his hand lightly against the stone. "Because meaning doesn't like to be rushed. Or forgotten." They reached the heart chamber at last. The great clock face loomed before them from within, its translucent surface glowing faintly. There were no numbers in the usual sense, only gentle arcs and symbols that shifted subtly, like thoughts rearranging themselves. Morel felt something settle in her chest as she stood before it. "It feels like it's watching me," she said. "It is," Alaric replied. "But not to judge." The tower hummed, soft, low, barely perceptible. The clock face brightened slightly, though its hands did not move. "This is the hour that listens," Alaric said. "It doesn't mark anything yet. It only pays attention." Morel swallowed. "To what?" "To what you carry," he said. Not what you say. She closed her eyes without being asked. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the hum deepened, not louder, but fuller. The lanterns warmed. The great gear behind the clock face shifted just enough to be felt rather than seen. Morel opened her eyes. I didn't tell it anything, she said softly. You didn't need to, Alaric replied. Listening is enough to begin. The clock face did not move, but it remembered. And somewhere within the tower, the first hour settled into place, not measured by minutes, but by the simple act of being heard. Chapter 3. The Hour That Was Carried. The tower grew quieter the higher they climbed. Not emptier, never empty, but quieter in the way deep water is quiet, holding movement without sound. Morel felt it in her breathing, which slowed without effort, as if the tower itself were setting the pace. They passed through a narrow passage where the stone curved inward, guiding them gently toward another chamber. This one was smaller, almost intimate, lit by a single lantern whose flame burned lower than the others. Alaric paused at the threshold. This hour, he said softly, belongs to what we carry with us. Morel stepped inside. The chamber held no gears, no shelves, no visible mechanism. Only a round stone floor worn smooth, and a low bench set against the wall. The air felt heavier here, not oppressive, but full, like a room where words had been spoken carefully for many years. Morel sat without being asked. Alaric remained standing, his presence steady and unobtrusive. I've never stayed anywhere long enough to feel this, she said quietly. This tower doesn't ask you to stay, Alaric replied. Only to notice. Morel rested her hands in her lap. For a moment, she said nothing. The silence did not press her to fill it. Instead, it waited. When I was younger, she began slowly, I thought time was something that chased me. That if I didn't keep moving, it would catch up and take something away. Alaric listened. I learned later, she continued, that time doesn't chase. It waits. And what it takes, we usually offer. The lantern's flame shifted, just slightly. This hour listens too, Alaric said, but differently. How? Morel asked. It listens to what has been held too long. She closed her eyes. Images surfaced, not sharply, not painfully, just gently. A place she had left without farewell. A letter never sent. A version of herself she had not allowed to rest. I thought carrying these things kept them safe, she said. Alaric nodded. Many do. And letting go feels like losing them, she whispered. Yes. The tower hummed again, deeper than before. The sound was not mechanical. It felt more like resonance, like something recognizing itself. What happens if I set them down? Morel asked. Alaric's voice was calm. They don't disappear. They change shape. The floor beneath Morel's feet warmed slightly. The lantern flame steadied. She opened her eyes. The walls of the chamber glimmered faintly, as though light were reflecting from something unseen. Morel felt lighter, not suddenly, not dramatically, but unmistakably. I don't feel empty, she said, surprised. You wouldn't, Alaric replied. You're making room. The clock face far above them shifted, just a fraction. Not enough to mark a full hour, but enough to acknowledge movement. Morel stood slowly. I didn't know I was allowed to put things down, she said. Alaric smiled, small and sincere. The tower teaches that to those who listen. They left the chamber together, descending slightly this time. The path curved inward, leading them toward a narrow balcony set within the tower's stone skin. From here, the city spread below them. The streets were calm, the buildings steady, the rhythm of life unfolding without urgency. Morel watched people move, unaware of the tower's subtle shift, unaware that something meaningful had just been carried, then set aside. They don't feel it, she said. They don't need to, Alaric replied. The tower does the remembering. Morel rested her hands on the stone railing. And you, she asked. What do you carry? Alaric was quiet for a long moment. Responsibility, he said at last. And trust. She looked at him. Those sound heavy. They can be, he agreed, if held alone. The tower's hum softened, settling into a steady presence once more. The lanterns resumed their gentle glow. Somewhere within the mechanism, an hour took its place, not measured by minutes, but by release. Morel exhaled slowly. "I think," she said, "this is the first place that hasn't asked me to become someone else." Alaric met her gaze. "The tower has no interest in who you might be, only in who you already are." They turned back toward the stairs together, their steps unhurried. Behind them, the chamber of the carried hour remained quiet, empty, but not vacant. And above them, the clock tower continued its patient work, marking meaning not by how long it took, but by how gently it was set down. Chapter 4. The Hour That Was Shared. The stairs curved downward this time, guiding them toward a part of the tower Morel had not yet seen. The air changed subtly as they descended, cooler, steadier, like the calm that settles after a long conversation finally reaches understanding. They entered a chamber wider than the others, its ceiling arched and high. Several lanterns hung here, each one lit, their flames different in shape and warmth. Some burned tall and bright. Others glowed low and steady. None flickered. "This hour," Alaric said, his voice softening, "is not meant to be held alone." Morel turned slowly, taking it all in. The walls were lined with narrow alcoves, each holding a small brass object. A ring worn thin, a folded scrap of fabric, a key without a door. The objects were ordinary, but the space around them felt alive with quiet significance. "Are these offerings?" Morel asked. "Not exactly," Alaric replied. "They're acknowledgments." She approached one alcove and leaned closer. The ring inside was smooth, polished by years of wear. "This belonged to a baker," Alaric said. "He shared his bread every morning with someone who never asked. One day, the sharing mattered more than the bread." Morel felt warmth gather behind her ribs. "They left it here?" she asked. "They didn't know they did," Alaric said gently. "The tower remembers what people give without keeping count." Morel moved to another alcove. The folded fabric looked like part of a child's cloak. "A woman tore it from her own coat," Alaric said, "to wrap someone else's hands when the cold came unexpectedly." Morel's fingers curled slightly at her sides. "This hour," Alaric continued, "marks what passes between people without ceremony. A shared silence. A word spoken at the right moment. A kindness that asks for nothing in return." Morel turned to him. "And it needs a keeper?" "It needs a witness," he replied. "Someone to notice that these moments happened." She looked around the chamber again, seeing now not just objects, but the spaces between them, the absence of noise, the patience of the light. "Why show me this?" she asked. Alaric met her gaze evenly. "Because you already understand it." Morel shook her head slightly. "I don't feel like someone who shares easily." "Sharing isn't loud," Alaric said. "It's often quiet enough to be mistaken for nothing at all." They moved toward the center of the chamber, where a low table stood. Upon it rested a single lantern, unlit, its glass clear and unmarked. "This lantern," Alaric said, "belongs to this hour." Morel hesitated. "What does it do?" "It waits," he said, "until someone is ready to place something inside." She looked at the lantern, then at her hands. "I don't have anything to give," she said softly. Alaric smiled, not in disagreement, but in reassurance. "Everyone says that." Morel closed her eyes. She thought of the road that had brought her here, of conversations she had stayed in when it would have been easier to leave, of listening she had offered without advice, of a moment long ago when she had sat beside a stranger simply because they were alone. Her breath slowed. She opened her eyes and reached out, not to place an object inside the lantern, but to steady it. The glass warmed beneath her fingers. The lantern lit. Not brightly. Not suddenly. Just enough. The chamber responded immediately. The lanterns overhead glowed a fraction warmer. Somewhere deep within the tower, a gear shifted, not loudly, but decisively. Morel drew her hand back, startled. "I didn't do anything," she said. "You did," Alaric replied. "You remembered that sharing doesn't require possession." The clock face above them moved, this time unmistakably. One full measure, smooth and certain. The hour had been marked. Morel felt something settle within her, not heavy, not light, but balanced. "I think," she said slowly, "this is the first place where being with someone feels like enough." Alaric inclined his head. "That's why the tower still stands." They left the chamber together, the lantern remaining lit behind them, holding its quiet glow. As they climbed once more toward the upper levels, Morel noticed the difference in her steps. They were lighter now, not because she carried less, but because she no longer carried alone. Above them, the clock tower continued its patient work, and within its stone heart, an hour of shared meaning found its place, unannounced, uncelebrated, but never forgotten. Chapter 5. The Hour That Chose to Remain. They climbed higher than before. The stairs narrowed, the stone walls drawing closer, not confining but protective, as though the tower wished to hold this part of itself more carefully. The lantern light here was softer, diffused, its glow resting rather than reaching. "This is as far as most people come," Alaric said quietly. Morel slowed her steps. "Why?" "Because this hour does not move unless invited," he replied. "And many are not ready to ask it to stay." They reached a small chamber just beneath the clock face itself. The ceiling curved low, and a single wide window opened toward the city. From here, the rooftop stretched outward in gentle layers, steady and familiar. Life continued below, unaware of how close it stood to something timeless. At the center of the room stood a simple chair. Nothing ornate, no markings, just a place to sit. Morel felt it immediately, the pull to pause. "This hour," Alaric said, "is the one people fear most." Morel did not sit yet. "Because it doesn't promise change?" "Yes," Alaric said, "because it asks whether what is already here is enough." She approached the window instead, resting her palms against the cool stone. The city looked smaller from this height, not diminished, but comprehensible. Patterns emerged, paths, routines, gentle repetitions. "I've spent so much time believing I needed to move on," she said, "to find something else." "And now?" Alaric asked. She exhaled slowly. "Now I'm wondering what I might have missed by always leaving." The tower responded with a low, steady resonance. Not urgency, not warning, recognition. "This hour," Alaric said, "marks the moment someone chooses to remain, not out of obligation, but out of understanding." Morel turned toward the chair. "If I sit," she asked, "does that mean I stop moving?" "No," Alaric replied gently. "It means you stop running." She considered this, then sat. The chair was warmer than it looked, shaped by countless others who had rested there briefly, carefully. Morel felt no rush, no demand. Just space. The lantern light shifted, becoming almost still. Memories surfaced, not of loss or regret, but of moments she had passed through without realizing their worth. A conversation cut short. A place she had liked but never returned to. A kindness she had accepted without allowing it to linger. "I thought staying meant settling," she said quietly. Alaric shook his head. "Staying means allowing something to matter." The great clock face above them began to glow, not brightly but steadily, its symbols arranging themselves with quiet confidence. "This hour does not end," Alaric continued. "It simply exists. Those who choose it do not stop their journeys. They carry a center with them." Morel closed her eyes. For the first time in a long while, she did not feel pulled forward by uncertainty or pushed onward by fear. She felt present. When she opened her eyes, the clock face moved. Not a full measure. Not yet. It paused, waiting. Morel looked at Alaric. "What happens now?" Alaric's gaze held warmth, and something like relief. "Now the tower waits to see whether you will rise too quickly." Morel smiled faintly. She stayed seated a little longer. Long enough for the silence to feel complete. Long enough for the city below to continue without her needing to follow it immediately. At last, the clock face moved, smooth, deliberate, certain. The hour had chosen to remain. Morel stood, feeling no urgency to leave the chamber, only readiness when she did. Alaric nodded once. "You have given the tower something rare." "What?" she asked. "Permission," he said, "to let stillness count." They descended together, the stairs feeling wider now, more generous. The lanterns along the way glowed warmly as though pleased. Below them, the city continued its quiet rhythms. Above them, the clock tower held its newest hour, not as a record of time past, but as a reminder that some moments are meant to stay. And Morel carried that understanding with her, steady and unhurried, as the night gently leaned toward its end. Chapter 6: The Hour That Let Go. Morning did not announce itself. It arrived the way understanding often does, quietly, without needing to be named. Morel felt it first as a soft loosening, a gentle shift in the stillness she had been holding. The tower no longer hummed with expectation. Instead, it rested, complete for now, like a sentence that had found its final word. She stood near the lower windows, watching the city awaken in small, ordinary ways. A door opened. Someone paused on a threshold. A cart rolled slowly across the square. Nothing dramatic. Nothing rushed. Everything exactly as it should be. Alaric stood a short distance away, his posture different now, lighter, though no less attentive. The lanterns within the tower burned lower than before, their flames calm and untroubled. "The tower is quiet," Morel said. "Yes," Alaric replied. "It has finished listening for the night." She turned to him. "What happens now?" Alaric smiled gently. "Now the hour is released." They climbed the final staircase together, slower than they had before, as though neither wished to disturb what had settled. At the heart chamber, the great clock face glowed softly, its symbols arranged in a pattern Morel had not seen yet. It was simpler, balanced. "This is the final hour," Alaric said. "Not an ending, just a letting go." Morel felt no sadness in the words, only clarity. The clock face began to move, not in fragments, not in careful measures, but smoothly as though it were exhaling. The motion was unhurried and certain. When it stopped, the glow softened, returning to its steady, patient state. The hour had been marked and released. Morel felt it within herself, a quiet permission to carry forward without holding too tightly. The understanding that what mattered had been noticed, and what remained unspoken did not need to be forced into words. "I think," she said softly, "this is where I leave." Alaric nodded. "Yes." They descended the tower together one last time. At the door, the city greeted them with its gentle morning rhythm. The tower behind them stood unchanged, watchful, enduring, unconcerned with whether anyone noticed its work. Morel stepped into the square and paused. "Will it need a keeper tonight?" she asked. Alaric looked up at the clock face, now still. "It always does." "And you?" she asked. "For now," he said. "Yes." She smiled, not with farewell, but with gratitude. "Then I hope it listens kindly." "It always does," Alaric replied. "Especially to those who learn when to let go." Morel turned and walked away from the tower, her steps steady and unhurried. The city opened around her, familiar and new all at once. She did not feel finished. She felt ready. Behind her, the clock tower settled into its quiet watch. The lanterns dimmed further. The gears rested. And the hours, those that could not be measured, waited patiently for the next moment worth marking. Above it all, time moved on as it always had. But meaning remained, held gently, and then, when the moment was right, released.